Great. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Really delighted here to have Sajjadur Rahman visiting us, giving an online talk. And he's a senior research scientist at Megagon Labs in Mountain View, California. So it's one of the nice things that we can have here by continuing to have an online tour where we can have you beaming across from a sunny early morning in California to us in our afternoon over here in London. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to talk. It's going to be on designing holistic human-centered data systems, talking about challenges and opportunities. I think I'll stop talking there and just hand over to you. So yeah, looking forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending today's talk on designing holistic human-centered data systems. So at any point in time during the talk, if you have any questions, feel free to sort of interrupt and ask me any questions. So I'm happy to answer those. So before I begin my talk, I wanted to take the opportunity to briefly introduce myself. Currently, I'm a senior research scientist at Megagon Labs, which is an AI research lab based in Mountain View, California, but we also have offices in Tokyo. Our parent company is Recruit Holdings, which has more than 200 subsidiaries all over the world, with primary business focus being recruitment, travel, and lifestyle. Before joining Megagon Labs, I completed my PhD in computer science from University of Illinois, where I focused on developing systems and algorithms for large-scale data analytics by synthesizing techniques from data management, human-computer interaction, and data visualization. At Megagon Labs, I have utilized lessons learned from these experiences to support data science workflows, such as natural language processing tasks. I have led various projects from building easy-to-use data science tools to developing interactive and explainable AI agents. So now going back to our actual topic of the talk, data science. In the past decade, data science has emerged as one of the most exciting disciplines as projected by this 2016 CRA article. Data science is crucial to data-driven decision-making in various domains, from banking and finance to agriculture and healthcare. This has been demonstrated by the increasing demand for jobs related to data scientists' roles in industry. And also data science initiatives have been taken by numerous CS departments all over the world. However, data science is a human-centered process. Stakeholders such as data scientists are involved in every step of a data science project, from collecting and analyzing data to decision-making. They interact with different tools and interfaces to accomplish their tasks, from spreadsheets and visualization tools to scripts and computational notebooks. However, when the interaction breaks down, their productivity falters. And these interactions can break down in many different ways. So for example, when working with even moderately sized datasets in popular spreadsheet tools like Excel and Google Sheet, execution delays can hamper decision-making. Then integrating automated agents within these tools can also be very distracting for the end users. For example, the infamous Clippy in Microsoft Office was notorious for causing distraction for every single user interaction. Finally, systems that support the data science workflows are not holistic. So practitioners have to tediously switch between many different data science tools to accomplish specific tasks. This actually leads to very poor user experience. And this usability aspect is one that I'm going to focus on in today's talk. Basically, I will focus the case where the goal is to ensure a holistic user experience for data practitioners. First, I will present takeaways from a study that informs design guidelines for building human-centered data systems. Then I will discuss the implication of instrumenting these guidelines in tools for diverse tasks, such as exploratory text analysis and graph data science. Finally, I will discuss how lessons learned from these experiences highlight multifaceted challenges for designing holistic data systems spanning human-centered design and data management challenges. So let's see how we can obtain a fine-grained characterization of data science workflows. A typical data science workflow requires significant human intervention in various phases. We have observed that the typical phase-based characterization often fails to capture the fine-grained user tasks and actions in each of these phases. However, understanding the fine-grained details is crucial for developing human-in-the-loop productivity tools. So to this end, we conducted a study of 10 industry projects that employ information extractions for various tasks, such as entity matching, knowledge-based population, text summarization, among others. So the goal was to better understand the tasks and actions users perform in each of these phases and obtain feedback on how to improve their experience with the existing tools and setup. So what did we learn about their workflows? Somewhat surprisingly, we observed that in each of these phases, users repeatedly performed 5 classes of tasks. These are view, assess, ideate, pursue, and verify. We see an example next in the context of the data preparation phase to better understand what we mean by these classes of tasks. So consider a scenario where a user is extracting key phrases from a hotel review corpus. So first, the user may view samples of reviews in spreadsheets. Then to understand data quality issues, they might cluster the reviews, specifically sentences in the reviews, to see if there's any pattern. For example, there might be a certain cluster appearing or emerging where there's a presence of a different language, or there are typos in the text, or there are maybe other tags like HTML tags or emojis. So based on this observation, users may formulate hypotheses for cleaning the documents, and then defines rules such as removing HTML tags or discarding non-English text. Then the users may pursue the cleaning scripts or any other model or built-in libraries to clean their data. And then they will verify the data quality to see if those sort of data quality issues still remain, or whether their cleaning hypothesis was correct or not, or whether they have to perform any other subsequent cleaning operation or not. And this process goes on and on. We found that this task model emerges across all the phases. So data preparation, model building, evaluation, and deployment. However, the specific sort of user actions and operations corresponding to each of these phases will vary. So the table on the left that I show here summarizes the user actions and operations that we identified for the text analysis workflows. So for example, the overview user action corresponds to the assessment task. And this operation is usually performed in many different phases, for example, data preparation or model building. And there are many different operations that correspond to this overview operation. We saw one example, which is clustering, but there are other examples such as looking at feature distribution and so on. There are many different sort of operations that the users can perform corresponding to these different tasks and their user actions. So what are some of the challenges that the users faced? During the study, users mentioned various challenges related to each of these class 5 classes of tasks. So many of these challenges are related to user interaction and also experiences with their iterative work setup. We will highlight a few of these examples challenges here. So let's first look at challenges related to user interaction. So text analysis requires users to perform advanced search features which existing systems lack. So for example, there is no default support for searching documents by parts of speech tag or filtering documents by their synonyms. So for example, traditional spreadsheet-like tools such as Microsoft Excel and Google Sheets have filtering features, but there's no way to plug in user-defined filtering. One of the scenarios that we encountered was that the user was looking to filter sort of like this review corpus by word, but their expectation was that all the reviews that contain the synonym of that word, for example, location, should also be filtered. But there's no way to sort of override the existing filtering feature of that of those methods. Then there's other challenges corresponding to user interaction. One of these is many of the systems actually are not that interactive. So there's lack of tools or interfaces to provide additional context to the users. So going back to our example of clustering reviews and looking at examples, there's no interactive feature available that can actually connect these clusters to samples within that cluster. So users often resort to sort of loading the data in a computational notebook, and then print some samples. So this is a very tedious experience. Now let's look at a few of the challenges related to their iterative workflow. Iteration introduces different set of challenges. So for example, existing tools do not instrument provenance and metadata management mechanisms as built-in features. Existing MLOps tools are widely used in production environment to enforce some of these features, but they are not available in sort of experiment setting where data scientists more often than not work. So the onus is actually on the user to develop solutions for validation and documentation. So we have seen cases where when users were performing information extraction, they would implement their own logging mechanism. And had they not implemented that logging mechanism, they wouldn't be able to sort of recover their experiment data or the provenance of where the data came from. So crucial information actually is lost. Another challenge is the lack of an end-to-end solution that support all 5 classes of tasks. So for example, if we see that there are specific tools that are suitable for certain tasks, spreadsheets work well when viewing data, whereas visualization tools or visualization libraries are more suitable for performing assessment operation. Ideation, we couldn't find any sort of good recommendation for tools. Sometimes people resort to sort of Google Docs to document and ideate. For pursuing Google sort of computational notebooks or scripts are the sort of typical tools of choice. So in some sense, when even within one phase, users are actually going through these different tasks, they need to move back and forth between different tools, which is a cumbersome experience. So how can we address these challenges? We propose several design guidelines, which can be broken into 2 themes. Interface-oriented guidelines, which suggest building domain-specific features, and system-oriented guidelines, which suggest various good practices for data science infrastructure development. We analyze the interaction challenges from the lens of cognitive engineering principles, which inform interface design guidelines. And unsurprisingly, we found that many of the existing tools do not adhere to these cognitive engineering principles, which led to many of these challenges. So for example, employing known metaphors. So when you are building tools for text exploration or text data analysis domain, having semantic search features would be helpful. On the other hand, these tools don't provide visual aids or focus users' attention, and that leads to this problem of users lacking context when they're exploring the data. One approach for improving user experience is to automate their unwanted workload. So for example, providing auto-generated summaries, such as showing feature distribution or clusters as soon as users load the data into the tool or the system, and also provide multiple coordinated views to help users by connecting the detailed data with the overview so that they have context. Another aspect is to support on-demand customization to empower users. So not only provide features out of the box, but provide mechanisms or provide ways for users to override those developer-defined built-in sort of library features or operations. The system-oriented guidelines, on the other hand, propose practices that may be incorporated in data science tools. So for example, we recommend developing end-to-end solutions that support all of the 5 classes of tasks within a single tool, so that users don't need to move back and forth between multiple tools as they iterate on their workflow. Another suggestion is to improve provenance mechanisms that captures user interactions, metadata of their experiments, documentations about their tasks and models to support iterative data science workflow, so that users can go back, explore their interaction history, explore experiment metadata, compare across different experiment runs, and so on. And these are some of the features that are not available by default in existing tools and solutions. So here is the full list of design guidelines. We will see in the rest of the presentation that how instrumenting these guidelines require interdisciplinary research effort. So now I'm moving to the next part of my talk, where I will show how we instrumented some of these design guidelines into two different projects. One relates to exploratory text analysis and another on graph exploration. So as we were conducting this study of understanding how the sort of practices, limitations, and different sort of opportunities for improvement with different data science workflows, I was also working on this project for building text data analysis tools, specifically focusing on sort of exploring document corpus. So, we sort of instrumented some of these ideas that we learned from the study in this tool. Let us consider a scenario where a data analyst is exploring customer reviews of an e-commerce website and wants to identify popular words in positive and negative reviews about hotels. So this might be a typical workflow for the data scientist or the data analyst, where they would first sort of select the data, and within the data selection operation here, or data selection task here actually covers many of the tasks within our task model. So users might view the review corpus, they will assess the pattern of the positive and negative reviews, and they might ideate how they would clean the data, how they would sort of create their feature vectors and so on for downstream analysis. So based on this sort of ideation, they might clean the data and pursue the cleaning model. Then they will featureize the data. Example is sort of generating TF-IDF vectors, and they might then sort of visualize whether their featureization scheme worked or not. So visualizing the top words for positive or negative reviews, and by TF-IDF score, and see whether they make sense or not. So this again corresponds to the task model that I presented earlier. So here is the tool that we developed called LEAM, focusing on supporting text data analysis workflows. And here we, as I mentioned earlier, instrumented some of the previously outlined design guidelines. So LEAM's user interface contains 4 components, which I will describe next. So first, we have this visualization view, which sort of acts as a dashboard where any visualization corresponding to a user's analysis or session is sort of generated or displayed. Then we have this data view or the table view, which actually displays the underlying data on which the user is performing their operations. And finally, we have this code editor, almost similar to how users write code in computational notebooks. So here users can sort of author their data science sessions using Python scripts. So what happened here is that we tried to combine these 3 different paradigms: visualizations, spreadsheets, and computational notebooks into one single ecosystem. And the aim is to sort of ensure ease of use as users author their data science workflow. Another feature that we integrated or introduced within this system is this operator view, which provided a number of different text analysis operations by default. So the example here is that we have a number of data cleaning operations like lowercasing, removing punctuations, and these fall under this high-level operation or operator called project. So this type of automation also actually help users in reducing repetitive tasks. So if they are repeatedly sort of cleaning the data or repetitively using the same cleaning operation across different parts of the data, such as positive and negative views in the corpus, instead of writing the code from scratch or referring to a previous cell and writing code for that, they can just sort of use this operator view to sort of quickly run those operations on certain columns of the data. So we talked about this operator view that automates users' unwanted workload, but how can we automate these various text analysis operations? To do so, we introduce a visual text algebra called VTA, and this principle design our domain modeling has its benefits, which we will describe next. So VTA formalizes the domain of exploratory text analysis operations and abstracts these operations into high-level operators. And also, we also developed a declarative language called Vital, which is essentially a Python library which implements VTA operations or operators. Here, we see the domain of VTA, which contains primitive data types, as well as composite ones like text and visualization, because we are focusing on interactive text analysis. So we have both text data types, but also visualization components. So these data types become part of the text data domain or the interactive text analysis domain. There are 4 high-level VTA operators that are selection, transformation, composition, and coordination. I'm not going to go into the details of these operators for the purpose of time, but I will provide a few more examples. So the purpose was to sort of group different text analysis operations into these high-level operators, build a library on top of that, and let users sort of issue those operations using those library either declaratively or using the operator view. So here is an example of the coordination operator. So the purpose of this coordination operator is to coordinate different components of the tool. So it can be 2 different visualizations in the visualization view. It can be linking visualizations with the data view, and users can actually issue this coordination operator using Vital, and this enables them to sort of define arbitrary coordination between different visualizations and data. So the example that we see here is the coordination operation is essentially clicking a bar in the bar chart, filters the corresponding point in the scatter plot and the corresponding data point in the table, and so on. And this feature is something the users really found very helpful, because in traditional systems like Vega Lite-based visualizations, once the visualization is generated, there's no way of adding new interactions to the visualization without updating the visualization specification from scratch. So that was one of the benefits of this coordination operator. As I mentioned earlier, users can issue both these operations in different ways. They can use declarative specifications in Python or interactively from the operator view. So now let's see an example of how users used LEAM. So going back to our toy review analysis example, let's see how that pans out. So here is a video demo, which I will play. So we see here that so far the user has visualized the top words. They have also generated this sort of scatter plot representing clusters of reviews. And here we have the data view. So the first thing that we will do is sort of connect these 2 visualizations using Vital commands and see how that will work. So here we are linking the charts. So sorry about that. So we see that the users have linked the charts. They have issued this Vital command to link these charts and sort of programmatically select the word bad, which identifies the corresponding sort of data point in the cluster of reviews where this word appeared. But it actually doesn't filter the reviews or the corresponding reviews where this word appeared. So now what will happen is that users will sort of deselect this previous selection operation, and then they will again write Vital commands to link these 2 visualization as well as this data view. So now we see the user is going to sort of paste the Vital command here at the top. And now we see that the bar chart, the scatter plot, and the data view are linked after sort of doing this bidirectional linking between the visualization and the table. So basically this way, just by writing code, we using this coordination operator, we have automated the unwanted workload of users where they have to go through and update the Vega Lite specification, which is more often than not JSON-based specification, and can be a tedious experience. So here is another sort of feature where we mentioned earlier that one of the process-oriented or system-oriented design guideline was to introduce provenance and metadata management mechanisms. And we attempted to implement one of these features here, where whenever the user performs an operations on the operator view, we sort of track that in this code editor. So here is an example where the user is actually cleaning the reviews. So so from the operator view, the users sort of perform the cleaning operation, which is basically then also sort of shown here. Now the user is also writing additional code, so removing emojis and lowercasing the reviews. And these are actually documented and tracked in the code editor. And these code editor sessions are then actually sent back to the backend and tracked. So we actually attempted to sort of track these user sort of code sessions in Vital. Now, we conducted several case studies with data scientists with Megagon labs using LEAM on two popular Kaggle datasets. One was classification of tweets, another was a spam detection in SMS. So here are some takeaways from the studies. So the users or the data scientists actually like this integrated view where they didn't need to move back and forth between different tools. So saved a lot of time in context switching, and there wasn't too much cognitive overload as users performed a specific task. Users also like this view coordination feature, the coordination operator, and being able to programmatically specify some of the operators. However, there were a number of sort of downsides. One complaint that we repeatedly saw was, even though this integrated view of having visualizations, spreadsheets, and a code editor in the same tool was helpful, this is again a different tool. So there's a learning curve associated with it. And LEAM has these new features, but many of the sort of features provided by default by traditional tools are not available. So which means that the users were not eager to transition from their existing workflow to these tools. So one takeaway is to build tools such that we can meet users where they work. We call this a semantic gap. The other one is the customization gap. So we provide very lightweight customization features. Some of the customization features like semantic search and filtering by synonym and those sort of features were still not supported within this tool, or the library functions that we provided were not designed in such a way that users can overread these operations or overread the outcomes of those operations. So these are the sort of two complaints that we saw, and these were the two negatives. So we call this customization gap. There's this third limitation that we observed, that even though we were tracking user sessions in the code editor and allowing users to retrieve those later, they also wanted to have a sort of feature where their interactions on the visualization view or the interactive visualization interfaces were also tracked. So basically, they wanted to see their interaction history and maybe perform additional downstream analysis to get a better understanding of what they were doing, where they were going wrong, and so on. So how can we bridge these gaps? To bridge the semantic gap, existing work leverages widgets in computational notebooks to build interactive dashboards, so users can both code and explore visualization in the same environment, and these interactions are synchronized. So here is a project from the MIT visualization group called B2, where they instrument a data frame so that any operations performed on the data frame are showed on the right side in this sort of dashboard style widget. And these visualizations and data frames are sort of interconnected. So that way users are still working in the computational notebooks, but they all have the benefits of programming as well as doing interactive visualization. So sort of this was one way of bridging the semantic gap, but also meeting users where they work. But one of the limitations of B2 is that it works only for tabular data, and sort of all the interactions that are supported by this tool are predefined, similar to how LEAM worked, and there's no way for the users to override their built-in features to have different outcomes in these sort of visualizations. And B2 also had this temporal gap. B2 provides a feature where all of the user interactions on this visualization are actually tracked in a separate notebook cell. But what happens if you remove that cell? So that interaction history is actually lost. And also, since B2 doesn't track sort of like the interaction semantics, details about what type of interaction the user performed also is lost. So all of these gaps still remain. So there's a recent project that I have been working on and collaborating on, where we try to redesign these widgets to address some of these gaps. So on the left, we have the traditional sort of design of widgets in computational notebook. And this is on the right, we have these redesigned widgets that we have developed. So what we have essentially done is introduced a state manager, borrowing from data management principles to sort of track users' fine-grained interactions. So we sort of log their interaction history as soon as users perform an interaction on the front end. We also store their corresponding states so that users can get the data corresponding to their interaction down the line when they are exploring their interaction history. Another sort of feature that we introduced was usually these widgets only capture event listeners, so operations such as click and so on. But when we go through the sort of like this visualization task taxonomy, there are high-level operations that the users perform. For example, selection and so on. So how can we? So we actually developed this action wrapper that maps users' low-level interactions to these high-level operations corresponding to visualization literature, so that the interfaces essentially become interaction aware. And when the users are exploring their exploration history, they can see the domain-specific interactions that the users performed. So this is sort of like the overall architecture of the system called Magneton that we have developed. So we have these React-based components that we developed. Here, the domain that we are focusing on is knowledge graph exploration. So we developed sort of specific components for looking at graph schema, looking at distributions of nodes and relations. So all of the component designs are sort of domain semantics driven. We built a suite of sort of widgets to support downstream tasks, and all of the operations that we sort of support for graph analysis are exposed through this graph service or graph querying library. And the sort of the way we instrumented this widget is that we provide the users a mechanism where from the notebook, the users can actually overread this library function and have a different outcome. And we will see an example of all of these features. So first, what happens is that the user will import the required libraries and then issue or create a widget to explore the graph. So here they issue this base explorer widget, which takes in the graph service library to generate exploration widget. So as we see, when the user sort of runs this cell, a new widget, which is essentially a multi-port coordinated view consisting of schema and distributions are displayed. Here on the left, we have the schema of the knowledge graph. The top top set of bar charts show the entity or node distribution, and the bottom bar chart visualization shows the relation distribution. And the users can sort of resize these components. They can also sort of zoom in and zoom out of these components, which are provided by default. Now let's see how we can track users' interaction history. So each widget is equipped with a history feature. So whenever user sort of runs or launches this history feature in a separate cell, this sort of tabular view is displayed, which tracks users' interaction history. And this interaction history is actually synchronized with the widget and dynamically updates as the users perform different interactions. So let's see an example here. So initially, the only interaction that we are tracking is the init operation, because that's the only we have so far initialized the widget. And we see this sort of like JSON view where you can look at the underlying data corresponding to the widget. So now the user clicks on the ability node, which sort of repopulates this widget as we see in the top. And as the user keeps on clicking on these different components, the widget view gets updated. And at the same time, the history is also continuously updated. So the users can see their interaction history, and they can use this history as a bookmark to jump through their previous interactions. So clicking on this restore button takes the users to the initial view. Clicking on a different restore takes them to their final visualization. So the next feature that we will look at is on-demand customization. So how users can actually overread these library functions from the notebook. So far we have looked at the exploration widget where we were seeing these distributions of nodes as descending order of the frequency of the nodes. But here we see an example where users actually wrote a custom sort function and sort of wrapped the built-in library function with the sort function so that these visualizations or the bar charts are displayed in the alphabetic order. So looking at this sort of JSON view of the data from the history, we know that X corresponds to the title of the node. So the user basically writes a sort function where they sort the data or the output generated by this node distribution computation function by the graph service library and sort it by the title. So now we see that this node node distribution is displayed in alphabetic order. But the users can also perform further customization. So they can then also decide to view the same distribution in descending or ascending order of node distribution. So for that, they need to just change one parameter in the code and re-execute the cell, which shows this updated visualization. So there are many advanced on-demand customization that users can perform. So for example, in this schema view, instead of showing the entire graph, just instrument a subgraph computation function and so on. But for the purpose of time, I am going to skip some of the details corresponding to these on-demand customization operations. So we are actually conducting participatory design studies with data scientists within Megagon Labs with these widgets to see where we can improve. What are some of the gaps and what are some of the features that the users liked, and then instrument those to further augment this library. So here are some preliminary takeaways. So users really like this history view. So they are usually accustomed to using, for example, Neo4j is a popular graph database management system, and it provides a default web browser where users can sort of explore the data. But what happens there is that users' exploration history is not tracked. And this is a feature that they really wanted to sort of track their exploration history with the specific queries that they issued and so on. So the history view provided by these Magneton widgets is something that the users really liked. However, although the users actually like these on-demand customization features because that empowers them to sort of explore many different objectives, they also requested that we should instrument more default features or built-in features so that the users don't need to go and implement every different features. For example, the one that we show here, being able to sort these visualizations by alphabetic order. One alternative could have been to just provide the users with a search feature where the users can search the node by the name of the node and so on. So instrumenting more sort of built-in features so that we can automate some of the unwanted workload of the users was one requirement. So we say that there's a sort of trade-off between user agency and automation that's emerging here, and it would be interesting to explore these dimensions in future studies. All of these experiences that I have presented so far has encouraged me to hold the view that there are several intertwined facets in human-centered data science. So we cannot simply sort of solve challenges corresponding to one of the facets without being mindful of the others. So here are some example facets. Units are these building blocks or steps in a human-centered data science workflow. So for example, phases, tasks, or different actions that the users perform corresponding to each task. Roles can be various stakeholders. It can be AI agents, so for example, models or specific visualization interfaces, or it can be humans, so data scientists, subject matter experts, and product managers. So far in my talk, I only focused on data scientists, but we have increasingly starting to realize that even in a data science project, there are these different stakeholders, and they also need to use different tools. They also need to provide feedback. They also need to collaborate. So there are many different challenges that are associated with these roles. Interfaces are interaction mediums between these agents and humans. So for example, spreadsheets and visualization tools, as I mentioned earlier. Domain corresponds to the underlying data domain of the workflow. So far, we have seen two different domains where we designed tools for, so text and graph, but we also showed the B2 example, which works for tabular data. Then supporting these different objectives in a human-centered data science workflow requires addressing several interdependent facets. So we will see some examples later. So this diagram here tries to capture this multifaceted nature of data science, where you have phases, you have different tasks within these phases, you have different tools or interface that supports these different tasks, and there are different users with different levels of expertise that collaborate and also interact with different sort of tools. And this sort of workflow emerges across many different data domains. So that is what we call multifaceted human-centered data science. So why do we need to concern ourselves with these multiple intertwined facets? So let's see a few examples. So for example, when we want to enable effective collaboration between stakeholders with different levels of expertise, we need to build plastic interfaces that can accommodate these different roles or expertise. So for example, data scientists may be comfortable working with computational notebooks, whereas product managers or maybe even subject matter experts might prefer web dashboards. So how can we build tools that can morph from one requirement to another? So from web dashboards to computational notebooks or vice versa. So there has been a recent work by researchers at Apple where they tried to sort of develop these plastic interfaces through a project called Symphony, which can sort of transition between web dashboards and computational notebooks. So this is a very interesting feature. And we are also trying to incorporate some of these features in the Magneton widget so that they can transform between notebooks and visualization dashboards. So here we see that the facets of roles and interfaces are intertwined. And we will later see that even this designing at this level of plastic interfaces is not going to be enough. So this is the second example where we have many different tasks and objectives that we want to accomplish. So we want to instrument these plastic interfaces within end-to-end systems. And we saw examples of some systems in this presentation already. So here we are not only looking at roles and interfaces, the other connected facets here is this diversity of different units, like different types of tasks. So here the objective is to sort of improve the efficiency of users' workflow. There's one final objective that I'm going to talk about is to provide sort of explainability. So how can we provide trustworthy and meaningful explanation of different workflows to the users? So that means that we have to do some kind of domain modeling to better understand the data domain and then communicate those results. One example would be the visual text algebra that we presented I presented for the text exploration project, or the LEAM tool that we presented. So we need data model that captures domains, roles, and interactions. Then we also need interfaces that can capture these user interactions and propagate these interactions to the backend so that we can store this information in the data model. So besides being plastic, the interface also needs to be interaction aware. At the same time, we also want to instrument provenance preserving mechanisms into these systems so that we can sort of store, persist, and catalog these different interactions that these interfaces track, and then store those in the backend. So here we see that we have these 4 different facets that we need to care about: multiplicity of roles, multiplicity of interfaces, different units, and also the diversity of data domain. So we see that we see through these examples that basically there are these intertwined facets, and we cannot simply solve for one of these facets because down the line, if we have a different objective to optimize for, we need to redesign those tools. So for example, here we see that Symphony has these plastic interfaces, but these interactions are not tracked so that we won't be able to provide a meaningful explanation or show interaction history to the users. So now we have to retrospectively feed maybe interaction awareness within these sort of interfaces. So to address the various intertwined challenges of human-centered data science workflows, we need a holistic platform that focuses on both human-centered design and data management challenges. So we outline this vision where we want to build a unified framework with knowledge graphs as the underlying data model. The idea is that nodes within the graph will capture the context, so where and when a task or interaction has occurred, and the scope, so specific data domain, phase, or task that interaction correspond to. And the relations can capture these domain-specific operations. We envision computational notebooks with interaction-aware interactive widgets as the basis for the end-to-end system. So Magneton already lays the foundation for a low-level kernel where users can design these different widgets that are interaction-aware, that can show history. The users can customize these widgets on demand. But designing these tools also require a lot of domain expertise. So maybe front-end developers would be more suitable for building these widgets, but end users might not able to engineer or build these widgets. So this has parallels to the popular sort of visualization stack that we have, where D3 was this low-level visualization system where users declaratively sort of design these visualizations. Then on top of that, we had JSON style specifications such as Vega and Vega-like, which made it easier for the users to generate visualizations. So we are also envisioning this similar design stack for authoring widgets in computational notebooks for different data science workflows, where users can declaratively specify different widgets and so on. So this basically is the future vision we have for developing this holistic platform, where we want to focus not only on interface design, but also on data management problems. We only showed the problem or discussed the problem of data modeling here, but there are other challenges related to the scale of the data and so on, which I have not covered here. But those are also very interesting and exciting challenges that we want to pursue in the future. So this brings me to the end of the talk. However, the talk would be incomplete without acknowledging the many amazing collaborators that I had over the years. So I am concluding the talk here with their smiling faces. So yeah, thanks everyone. And I am happy to answer any of your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for a really informative and interesting talk there. I'm going to stop the recording so we can have the Q&As without that being recorded. So let me just stop that quickly.